written upside down.
Hey, my book's upside down. How should we understand the reality of sin?
So we're up to the fall, which is why we're dealing with sin. So sin is present in human history. This reality of sin can be understood clearly only in the light of divine revelation, and above all in the light of Christ, the Savior of all. Where sin abounded, he made grace abound all the more.
I noticed that we're not defining sin there.
Not really. We kind of get to sin more specifically when we're talking about sins in like specific.
But before we want to know what it is, we want to understand the reality of it.
Well, we're talking about how it's affected us now, right? Like, so sin is missing the mark, right? That's what it means. It means
to miss the mark.
To miss the mark.
An arrow that does not hit the center.
Exactly. So it's you're failing at something. You're failing to do the good is the idea. So again, it's like, oh well, what's original sin? It's this mark that we all have. Which is like, which we're going to get to, where it's like, oh, we're all sort of like in this state where we sin because...
What do we mean by human history? Just human events, like people? Like, do we mean that in a Francis Fukuyama sense of like war and struggle? What do we say? Like, sin is present in human history.
Yeah, history meaning what it has meaned right up until Francis Fukuyama made a mockery of it, which is like the events of time in time. So like all of human history is marked by sin. So how should we understand the reality of sin? It's present in human history.
And we can only understand it in the light of divine revelation. I guess it's not clear what failing is unless you have a metric by which you can show this is the correct way to do something.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, there is no sin. There's just
people
random permutations.
Mucking around in the dark. Yeah.
Or by their own points of light.
But with the light of Christ, we can see. We can see
Where
how
sin abounded, he made grace to abound all the more.
So there are these... Again,
it's a weird little poem to end on.
Well, I think something I mentioned before, there are sort of principles of Catholic thought, and this is one of them. So where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. Where sin is present, God is giving grace, his power, to restore it, to make it right. Right? So it's like...
The more you sin, the more grace you have?
Basically, the more you sin, the more possibility you have of, like, every failure is an opportunity, is the idea, right? Like, so, like, if you're a prostitute doing drugs in the slums and you're killing people and stuff like that, like God is going to be actively seeking you out more because of where you are.
That's son, prodigal, the
prodigal son. The prodigal son
gets more than the son who just stays home and does the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah.
Doesn't that seem counterintuitive? I mean, we are trying to do the right thing, but
the elder son thinks it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
So for those who are not familiar, the story of the prodigal son is there's a son and he's got an inheritance. This is a parable that Christ told. And he says to his father, there's two sons, and he says to the younger son says, I want to take my inheritance and go.
Yeah.
So the father pays him out and he goes off to the city and he has a great time, sex and drugs and rock and roll. And then he's like, oh, my life is so empty. I'm so sad. He comes back, but he's so ashamed to come back to the father and to beg. But he's like, oh.
But he does it.
But he does it because he's like, I know, like, there's one place that, like, I realize now my riches are my father's love, not the things that he can give me. So he comes back and the father, like, is very happy and he rejoices and he slaughters the fatted calf and gives him his cloak and he says, like,
fatted calf being the best is that a good calf?
The best calf.
Tip-top calf.
I'm going to have a big party to celebrate my son coming back.
Yeah.
And it sort of seems like, well, this is like a nice story about, forgiveness, right? Which it is. Where it's like, oh, we are the prodigal sons because we sin and we go away from the father.
But I remember this right, then he then takes half of the stuff that went to the good son and gives that to the brother?
No. The older brother is just resentful of the fact
that he gets a party.
That he's just like, but he's stuffed up.
Yeah.
Right? And the father's like, yeah, but my son has been restored to me. Like, you should be grateful because you've always had my love. And so that's
And this is of the sheep, like that you celebrate over the coin that's been lost down the back of the couch.
Well, there's the brilliance of this particular parable, which is that it seems at first glance like it's actually about the sinner.
Right.
But it's not.
It's about the non-sinner.
It's about those who are true. Yeah. Right? Like it's about like, because all the time as a Christian you see it where it's like, oh, these people are profiting from their wickedness, right? These people, like the wicked prophet.
Cradle Catholics will often feel
deeply resentful of converts.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what this story is for. Right? Like it's for the prodigal son thing, obviously, but it's also for like the fact that, like, well, you're not supposed to resent good things. And if you've got a good thing, you shouldn't resent sharing it. And Christ is always doing parables like this, which is like the workman at the 11th hour and stuff. Oh, well, I've been slaving all day in the hot sun, and these guys rock up at the 11th hour, and they get the same wage as me.
Yes.
And the landowner says,
Yeah.
like, who are you to tell me what to do with my own
Deal with
things? No, not deal with it. This is my gratuity that I'm giving. Who are you to tell me how I should give it?
But that's what deal with it means. Like, that's how it is.
Well, it's not just deal with it. Well, no, I don't think it is just deal with it, right? Because it's like you've got what you earned.
But
why be resentful of what other people?
But you've got what you earned. But we also think that all of God's gifts are through a superabundance.
Sure.
And some people are working harder for the superabundance than others.
Right.
But
So what?
Well, you haven't earned it.
Yeah, but you should be happy that other people have good things.
I know, but I'm not because I'm bitter and small.
Well, and we'll get to envy later. And envy is a particular type of sin.
I think that's my worst one. And I know a lot of people might look at me and go, gluttony's your worst one, Jimmy. Are you sure, Jimmy? Stains on the trousers? Is it lust? Maybe that's a bad one for you. But envy.
Yeah, it's definitely envy for you.
Amos Gill has a great new joke he's working about.
Okay.
Pride. Where he's like, these people who go, I'm so proud. I'm such a proud person. I have to work on my vanity. I'm too vain.
Yeah.
You go, but then you look at these people and they're hideous. How about you have a little more pride, a little more vanity? You know, how about you have a vanity mirror, pluck out some of those blemishes? Anyway,
Not great.
Isn't
Amos could do better. All right.
I'm doing maybe not a good version.
All right. So what's the next question?
Oh, what was the fall of the angels? Hello.
So we've talked about this a little bit last
Yeah.
time. Yeah. This expression indicates that Satan and the other demons, about which sacred scripture and the tradition of the church speak, were angels created good by God. They were, however, transformed into evil because with a free and irrevocable choice, they rejected God and his kingdom, thus giving rise to the existence of hell. They try to associate human beings with their revolt against God. However, God has wrought in Christ a sure victory over the evil one. So a couple of things there. We know about the angels and their fall from Revelation, right? From literally the book of Revelation, not just like Revelation generally. It's talked about in the book of Revelation.
He creates all the angels.
He creates all the angels and they're good.
Yeah.
Right? But through their own pride, they make this one, an irrevocable choice, which is what we talked about. Like angels are these immaterial beings. They don't exist in history. So they get a sort of advantage. Irrevocable, yeah.
Irrevocable.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say.
Well, that's fine.
But to voc.
Is to speak.
Voce.
Yeah.
Right.
They
So
cannot
you've said
unspeak
it once,
it.
you can't say it again.
Yeah, yeah. And through their...
And they knew it was irrevocable?
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Giving rise to the existence of hell. So hell did not exist. Giving rise to the existence of hell is a weird way to phrase that.
Right. And again, we'll
Does God make hell?
Well, no, right?
Okay.
Like, I mean, because... And we'll get to hell as well. We're going to get to that. I have my T-shirt.
Yeah,
but
I
very...
would rather not personally. But that's a breakthrough for me because I always used to thought I'd want to go to hell. Like, I'd be pleased if there was a hell because it would show that there was...
Because it's kindness, yeah.
Well, that there were all along, the world was not just a big weird
joke,
atomic mistake. That there was a meaning and purpose and morality.
Yeah.
And even if I'd fucked it up, at least I would continue on.
So St. Augustine...
Now I don't want to go to hell.
St. Augustine says in Confessions, right? Like, even if I were to go to the further steps of hell, like, you would still be there, God, right? Like, and this is the sort of... like, hell is for the damned. It's for those who have chosen not to be redeemed by Christ through their actions, through their choices.
Through failing to be elected.
No, I wouldn't say that at all.
All right. The church sometimes would put it like that.
It's
We'll get to it. No, I know.
Trying to tangent me here. I'm not going to do it. But yeah, like you put yourself there by your own decisions, and it's only there because of failing, right? But it's also like even the existence of hell is a type of mercy because it's not annihilation, right? Like,
right, but God doesn't make it, but God...
He allows it. He allows all evil.
Within the creation that he has created.
Yeah.
Phrase that. That could be better phrased. Giving rise to the existence.
So they try to associate human beings with their revolt against God. So we see that clearly in Genesis. We see that clearly in the Gospels. That there are forces.
They're trying to get us on side?
They're trying to get us to sin like they sin.
Right. They associate human beings with their revolt against God. They have a revolt against God, separate to human beings.
Yes.
They've got their own thing going on.
They've got their own thing going on.
But we happen to be, we're caught up in it.
Yeah.
They
They're
see
caught up.
us and
yeah.
they want a piece.
Well, it's the same thing of like, Well, like you were just saying, right? Like you're an envious person.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to use you like...
No, I am.
Yeah. So what does envy do?
I'm thinking about killing you and taking those glasses.
So envy is like not wanting a good, not wanting another person to have a good that they have. Not for yourself, not because you want that good.
You want to deprive it from
right, because that's jealousy.
Yeah.
But envy
I
is
even
like...
be wearing the glasses.
You just
I
don't
want
like
you
me.
dead and I want those glasses
exactly.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a real feeling. And it's hard to... I think we probably overuse envy in another meaning of like wanting a good for yourself.
Yeah.
A lot, but to want
That's
to
just
deprive it
jealousy.
of another person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so malicious, is because it's like...
I want you to suffer.
I just want you to suffer.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because I'm suffering. Right? Maybe that's the reason, is because I don't have it, and I just don't want you to
I
have
don't
it.
want to get Freudian, but
Yeah.
I think that would be a big part of it.
Yeah.
For me.
So for the angels, it's the same. Right? Like, it's the same.
The demons want to deprive us of the relationship we have with God that they've lost.
Yeah. Because they also know what they've suffered.
Yeah.
Right? Like, immediately. They're like, oh, yeah, this is awful.
However, God has wrought in Christ a sure victory over the evil one. So even though they're trying to get you, it's all right.
So the thing to again, another principle of Christian thought, I would say, is that the victory is won, right? Like, that you can always take solace in that the victory is won. You don't have to do anything further. As bad as the world seems, nuclear war, starvation, whatever, ultimately Christ has won the victory on the cross.
It's already happened.
It's already happened, and all we have to do is accept it.
All right. I think it's
the good news, baby.
I mean, we'll get to hell. We'll
get to hell. We'll get to hell.
What was the first human sin that's eating the apple, surely?
So, when tempted by the devil, the first man and woman allowed trust in their Creator to die in their hearts. In their disobedience, they wished to become like God, but without God, and not in accordance with God. Thus, Adam and Eve immediately lost for themselves and for all their descendants the original grace of holiness and justice. So at the end of the last episode, we talked about what's the state of humanity pre the fall. It's this state of holiness and justice in a relationship, perfect relationship with God, with each other, and with all the creation.
Yeah.
They lose this through the first sin, right? And that's not original sin.
And it alters their DNA in a way such that they pass it on to their children.
It's not just, well,
like
I mean,
a certain vaccine.
I mean, we do say it's blood, right? Like we say it's by their blood, but
Yeah.
like I think it's more useful to think of it as a spiritual illness that we inherit.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean,
But it doesn't just affect them; it affects all their children.
because they are all of the human race at the
Yeah.
time, the entire human race.
So when you're emphasizing we have two parents, this
Yeah.
is very important for this point.
It is, yes, because
That it's a
all
genetic
sin comes
problem
through
for the human race.
all sin comes through Adam and Eve. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because they're the entire human race at the time, the entire human race has fallen.
Do you think they got to go to heaven?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, right? So, because if you look at icons of the resurrection, it's always Christ, like in the Eastern tradition, and we talked a bit about this already. It's always Christ coming up out of hell, holding the hand of either or both Adam and Eve.
Right.
Right? So it's always like a guy in the middle holding the hands of two people who are sort of below him.
Yeah.
Because he's redeeming all of humanity. Right? So he's dragging Adam and Eve out of hell. From its beginning. And so that's what Christ does by the action on the cross, going into hell. Well, who's Cain? Right? Cain is like you or I. Like he's a descendant of Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we believe that people might go to hell post-Christ,
Yes.
and that he maybe didn't... I mean, did he get everybody out of hell?
No, he only got the just.
But we're assuming there that Adam and Eve are just.
Again, I think we're going to get to
Right.
when we're going through the creed, we talk about Christ goes into hell.
Yeah.
And we'll get to this stuff when we get
Who
there.
is redeemed before Christ?
All that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, but the important thing here is like
Hot one.
it's a hot one. This is the first sin. So the first sin is the disobedience to God, but they allowed their trust in their Creator to die in their hearts.
Man, you know what's going to be a good podcast is when we get to the end, and then the podcast could just be like one issue at a time, and we see where it goes in conversation. I'm shackled to Benedict's.
Well, yeah, you have to do it in order. All right, so next question.
I am not a systematic thinker.
I know you're not.
I'm a systemic thinker. All right, well, what is original sin? And why don't the Orthodox believe in it?
I'm not going to deal with that. Original sin, in which all human beings are born, is the state of deprivation of original holiness and justice. It is a sin contracted by us, but not committed. It is a state of birth and not a personal act. Because of the original unity of all human beings, it is transmitted to the descendants of Adam, not by imitation, but by propagation. This transmission remains a mystery which we cannot fully understand.
I have nothing on this one except that it's obviously describing a reality. Do you know what I mean? Like, people always go, "Oh, original sin, what a sad, nasty little view of the world."
Oh, you think babies are evil?
Yeah, some shit like that. But it's just so obviously that babies are evil. Like, if you've met enough babies, it's not right.
James has a lot of babies.
Wrong. There's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
And like, you could argue that this is a myth to describe the world that we see, and this is all just like made up. But the thing that it's describing is, without question, real. And to think that there's not some weird, broken thing in people where you're not the person you want to be or should be, and that you're alienated from what you are. I mean, that's a better argument, I think, for the distinctiveness of human beings is how
we fucked up.
Well, that animals are not alienated from themselves in the way that people seem to be.
Sure.
I don't know if that is self-consciousness, because I think Adam and Eve in the garden pre-fall are still self-conscious. They're still thinking about what they.
Well, you can have a sort of like, and we all know people who are sort of like well put together, right?
Yeah.
Where you think, oh, that's a really well adjusted person, and it's like there's somebody who's sort of like found a harmony with themselves or whatever. And I generally think of these people as Catholics, because it's like, oh, they've ordered their lives towards God, and it's like their life is without personal sin, and it shows in like the way that they prudentially act and virtuously do things.
I think it's worth pointing out that that's a very low percentage of Catholics as well, though.
Super low.
Super low. Like, in terms of...
Present company definitely excluded.
Well, we would call that sort of saintliness, right? And these are the people
holiness,
who become saints when they die. We might recognize that they've been saints, and we use that as signs. And it's like, I've met so many Catholics now. Three people have that energy.
Sure. Now, but maybe later.
Oh, and like, well, maybe later, and then maybe some of those people will
Yeah.
You know? I mean, some of them are dead now, but it's like, it's rare. It's rare and it's weird.
But I mean, I think the original...
That we're all mired in original sin?
The important thing here is that,
absolutely.
like... Well, it's a state of our lives, right? So it's... what is that state? We don't have that original relationship that Adam and Eve had.
Yeah.
It's contracted and not committed. So this is the thing where it's like...
You get it no matter what you do.
No matter what happens.
Born into it.
You're born into it, right? Like you're born into a crack-addicted mother. You could be born into original sin.
You got crack in your system when you come out. You got little crack baby eyes.
Like, life is deeply unfair, right?
Man, but it's also like you need that view of human nature to understand. I mean, like, why does communism go wrong? Because a guy likes power and killing his enemies and starving Ukrainians out? Of course.
Yeah.
Time and time again.
So it's a state of birth and not a personal act. So there's nothing we do to contract it.
Yeah. But here's what's also disgusting.
Please let me finish.
All right.
Please let me finish.
Fine.
So it harms that original unity that humanity had, right? Like, so it's not just our fracture of the relationship with God, but it's our fracture of the relationship with each other and with the rest of creation.
All of harmony is disturbed.
Yes.
But here, if we didn't have that beforehand, then why does Eve do it in the first place? She's in perfect harmony. I know she's tempted by the devil.
Yeah, we talked about this already.
But she's not able to resist the devil's tempting, even in a non-fallen state.
No, but she still has freedom, because this original state of holiness and justice is not God possessing Eve to do the right thing.
Yes.
She still is a free
She's
human
able
being.
to choose the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Instead, it's a vocable choice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, that's nice. Is Satan going to be here in the end times? He's not destroyed.
Well, St. Michael is going to, like, mess him up, bro.
Isn't that already happening? That hasn't happened yet?
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's happened at least once in
I've
my
been
life.
thinking about St. Michael a lot this week.
We should move on.
What are the other consequences of original sin? What other consequences derive from original sin?
So this is, like, super important.
Yeah, one of my favorite words in the English language coming up at the end of this one.
In consequence of original sin, human nature, without being totally corrupted, right? So we're not Lutherans, we're not Protestants, we don't think we're completely corrupted. We're slightly corrupted, right? Human nature is wounded in its natural powers. It is subject to ignorance, to suffering, to the dominion of death, and is inclined towards sin. This inclination we call concupiscence.
Concupiscence, I've been calling it.
That's totally fine.
Concupiscence. Can you see, do you have a typo in your version?
I don't know, do I?
I've got a typo. I've got like the smallest typo I've ever seen.
What's the typo?
After corrupted,
Yeah.
the comma is underlined.
I don't have that. Oh, no, I do have that.
Yeah.
There's a typo. There's a typo in the Catechism.
That's the smallest typo I've ever seen. I mean, it's not. Do you want to see it? Do you want to? Can you get in? Can you get in? So, you want to after the word. Hold on.
I wonder if
After
that's...
the word corrupted in 77 over here.
You can't hear it. You can't see it.
Yeah. I'll go closer. No, it's worth it. Oh, close. Man, it's there. Page 45.
But so the reason this is important is because this is the state we inherit. So we are ignorant, right? And again, you don't have to go very far in human nature to find people who are ignorant, including yourself. We suffer, we die, and we're inclined towards sin. So we are inclined to do the wrong thing.
Feels good.
Yeah, right. And again, it's this thing of like, I know what I ought not do, but I do it anyway.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I have to smoke another cigarette. I have to have another shot of heroin. I have to whatever, right? Like, I have to eat the next cheeseburger.
Yeah, like the fuck. I got a fucking problem.
You love sex. Sex is a great one. Yeah, like all these things where it's just like it feels so good to do the wrong thing, even though we know we shouldn't do it, and it's always dissatisfying. And it's like,
Hold on. Yeah, in some way.
Yeah, it is.
In some way. Oh, I don't want it. It's too dirty. But there is, that is true. That is true. But it's not always clear that it's going to feel like that before.
No.
But you go, if I thought about it more, I would have known.
I would have not done it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, I love booze, right? Like, and that should be quite clear to anybody who's watched this podcast.
You are a booze hound.
And the amount, the amount of times you wake up a bit groggy in the morning, you're like, why did I have that one extra drink?
The sin of not drinking French champagne.
I thought we'd give the champagne a miss this week.
Yeah, we're off it because I've had such a problem with booze that I've had to get off it.
Yeah, and it's like, well, because it feels great. At the time, it's like fantastic, and you sort of think, oh, no, I shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
But you do it. And then you're like, oh, that was a terrible idea.
Well, it's hard because the judgment is gradually impaired. So
Well,
it's quite hard.
and I think intoxication
what's
is a good analogy for sin as well, right? Because you can impair yourself through habitually doing it, right? Like you can wound your nature further. Like we inherit this state, but in terms of personal sin, we're going to get to this later.
Yeah.
We can continually harm ourselves to the point that we become numb to its effects.
I was speaking to a guy about masturbation.
It's a great
He was
example.
like, yeah, well, why would masturbation be wrong?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, there's good arguments for masturbating, you know? There's great arguments for masturbating.
It feels good is basically the
You
only
feel better afterwards. You have a relaxed attitude to the rest of the day. But it got me thinking about other kinds of sexual, and this does not like bear out because some animals like masturbate and some animals have gay sex, whatever. But I was thinking about like, could you ever train an animal to pull out and?
I think that's the point at which we put up the James with his head. Yeah.
No, but think about it. But we go that's. Like, what is it about that that's unnatural and feels wrong? Because it's a very big part of everybody's sex life nowadays in the West.
Is it?
Oh, boy, probably, yeah. Yeah, certainly the cinematographic representations of it. But it's like, I don't think you could train an animal to, even just to pull out. You couldn't train an animal to pull out, could you?
I don't know. I'd never thought about it.
Like, it's not natural for the animal to pull out. An animal's never going to go, no, I got too many pups already. I'm pulling out.
I think I just want to move on
Right.
from this point.
But you know what I mean? Because people don't even know that that's weird. All right, put the thing in. Censor it out if you have to. Thought it was a good point.
I think as we go, we find a line. And I really feel like we've just
You
crossed
think that's
one.
the line?
Yeah.
All right.
I don't mind talking about sex in a frank way, but there's a way in which to talk about it that I feel like
I'm just saying like a dog would never pull out and do you know what I mean?
Oh, you've just tarnished this whole thing.
Have I?
All right, yeah. Let's do the next question, which is like...
After the first sin, yeah, I'm making a point that we can all agree on. After the first sin, what did God do?
So after the first sin, the world was inundated with sin, but God did not abandon man to the power of death. Rather, he foretold in a mysterious way in the proto-evangelium that evil would be conquered and that man would be lifted from his fall. This was the first proclamation of the Messiah and Redeemer. Therefore, the fall would be called in the future a happy fault, because it gained for us so great and glorious a Redeemer.
Proto-evangelium is like you'll have a son and he'll crush the snake's head.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
We can pop that on the screen, but it's like, yeah.
It's the proto good news. Yeah, it's the good news before the good news. So God is announcing the plan for redemption, even as the fall is happening.
The fall is happening.
Yeah.
And it's weird to think of it as taking time. Because the world would be transforming in different ways.
Well, they get cast out of Eden and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have to.
It's a big angel with a sword.
Does he like march him out?
I don't know.
He's like a bouncer?
Like Pope Francis.
Wait. Oh, he was a bouncer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What time are we at, Sammy?
Proto-evangelium.
Probably like 40.
You ever see Neon Genesis Evangelion?
I never did.
It means new start, good news. But it's not about that. It's about sad little Japanese people in a future city.
I really feel like maybe we could
You're done.
get
You're
a clean
spent. You're
cut at
spent.
40.
It was the thing about but it was a dog. It was, but I'm saying that's an act that people would do and would think would be natural and normal, but it would never occur to an animal to do it.
I'm not sure what you want me to say to that.
Yeah, James, that's a great point.
What? But what are you talking about?
Talking about concupiscence.
Okay. Make
Yeah.
the line clearer.
I think I'm going to do it on stage and people will get it.
I don't want to put this in the podcast.
I just edit. No, we'll edit it out. And if you want to find out what I was saying, you have to sign up.
I don't want this to be released even to people that pay for it. People that pay should not be subjected to this.
If you pay for it, you got to pay for it. Thank you for joining us today on yet another excellent episode of the Catechast. That one made Jack a little more. I don't know why everyone's not agreeing with me that it's an interesting point.
All right, so we've just had a bit of a conversation where James has just said a dog as an example of concupiscence.
Yeah.
And how it's telling.
No, this is being restructured.
No. Please let me be fair. I'm trying to be fair.
No, but I want to be. The fairness is, the conversation was about a dog's inability to even force a dog to do that. That our concupiscence is so great that there are sexual acts that we do as people.
Yeah.
And then are deemed to be normal.
Right.
That we talk ourselves into. That you couldn't actually, with sticks and food,
make an animal do it.
Make an animal do it.
Right.
And that is the power of concupiscence. That was the point.
Right.
So I couldn't have explained that with, fidelity.
No, well, I think you can, and I think and let me, because I believe that we will cut the intervening 15 minutes.
All right.
Where we did scream at each other.
Believe away.
Or more, I screamed at you. We'll release that to the Substack. Where I think you can explain this more easily as, or in a more beautiful way, as the example of a marriage where a man chooses not to have sex with other women and vice versa, like a woman chooses not to have sex with other men, as an example of like them overcoming their concupiscence, right? Because their concupiscence would tell them to do these things, right? Their inclination to sin. You don't walk down a street and see a nice pair of legs and think, I'm disinterested. You walk down a street and see a nice pair of legs and go, that's a nice pair of legs, right? And so do I, right? Because I'm a single guy. And it's like, okay, well, like my concupiscence is saying like, go and do something.
Yeah.
But I have to overcome that, right? But the fact that I know that I have that inclination and that we all do that every day, we all do these things where we're like, we see the thing that's easy, that would be nice, that would be like pleasurable, but we choose not to do it, is proof of the fact that we have this concupiscence. And the fact that you could, you want to use the clip of me saying like,
We'll just cut to the clip.
Yeah.
But I think, man, it's sort of like a poem to me. I don't want to say that, and, sometimes the ear understands before the mind does. Because it's like the concupiscence there is so strong that it's like more than, like, it's fear of suffering, right? Like it's fear of a pregnancy. But even then, like gay men would be pulling out and doing all sorts of weird stuff.
Right, because you can train yourself into doing things that are degraded by like habituation.
Habit,
yeah. And again, like we all know that, right?
But that pleasure is not the highest.
Well, the example that I would use, and I use it in the context of, and we'll get to this again. We'll get to this later. The context of like sexuality, right? Like, and so yeah, the problem of homosexuality.
Sorry, you can't go. We'll get to this later. And we have a reference to there being budgie smugglers design, but you can't just have that be the way that you explain that.
Sorry,
People don't know that's something you say all the time, or that you're going to bring out merch for it. You can't just go. We'll get to this later, and then start talking about the problem of homosexuality. You fucking kidding?
So
What level of self-awareness are we working with here?
it presents as a problem for Catholics. I think it does because there are clearly people who feel inclined to this.
Yeah.
And I know very good Catholics who do feel inclined to it, who succeed or fail on that spectrum, right? And I don't want to judge these people because I have my own failings.
Sure.
But in a sense, I think that like having been a man who's watched pornography, like you know that like there is a way in which the things that you do and the things that you consume affect who you are.
Oh boy.
Right? And this is like a well documented thing, like it's hitting the mainstream now, right? Where it's like, oh, teenage boys who watch like hardcore pornography have
Hitting and choking and
are unable to get off unless they do like violent sexual acts because they've habituated themselves to these things.
yeah.
And
Conditioned.
so, yeah, exactly. And this is concupiscence.
Pavlov's choking out. To make it about dogs again.
So this is concupiscence, right? Like we have this inclination to sin,
Yeah.
which is like we're born with, and the way that we respond to that matters, right? The things that we do.
You can have a society
Yeah.
that encourages your...
Yeah.
And you get further and further lost down
Yep.
the avenues of...
and that will like dislocate you more and more from your relationship with God,
Yeah.
from relationship with others, and from relationship with the world,
And
because
then it
it's
accelerates.
Yeah,
right? Because
absolutely,
Those
yeah.
people then make the thing for the next generation and
Yeah.
so on and so forth. And ideally, you want to be trapped in a virtuous cycle.
yes, you want to be trapped in a virtuous
You want to
cycle.
be making better and better people.
Yeah, you want to be in a society which is encouraging you to do the right thing, even when it's hard, because it's the right thing. Not that like, oh, you're fine, I'm fine, you can do whatever you want.
But that society looks like things are banned. There's censorship.
But also, what is
There's-
society? It's a group of people who, through their own freedom, have decided to aim for the good rather than aim for the evil. And a society
view
of
of
dogs
society.
can't do it, right? Like you can't get you couldn't convince a group of dogs or a group of animals to do like increasingly debased sexual things or whatever, because at some point their nature's going to kick back, right? And they're just going to be like, it's not interesting.
They'll be bored by it.
Yeah.
More than anything. Yeah.
Whereas we won't be.
No, we can just
just
getting
keep
worse
going.
forever.
Yeah.
Until you got a little boy jumping out of a cake.
Yep.
Right in the heart of Rome.
Exactly. Mikey. All right. I think we got to the end of that.
It's a good episode on the fall.
Maybe we keep all of that in there. I don't know.
I think it could be. You know, this is not an either or. This could
I think
probably
we should
be
watch that.
edited
Yeah.
in a tasteful way.
Tasteful. Such an interesting term coming from you, James.
Well, it's tasteful for the dog, let me tell you that. Oh my God.
Good night, everybody.
This episode's going to be very different when we're in an air-conditioned room.